This is the pre-scene document that you have been assigned. It's a company called Pixlwizz. Beautiful name, I suppose. And it's a gaming company predominantly. And as with all the case studies, we now see a COVID-19 statement, which simply outlines the fact that as you're writing, as you're facing your examination, you can assume that COVID-19 is not affecting or not disrupting your supply chain. Not that you cannot refer to the pandemic. If the question, or if there's a situation, let's say, for example, you're talking about major risk elements. In such a situation, obviously, you can talk about the pandemic. But other than that, it might be prudent to just assume that you're not operating in a pandemic-ridden world. Just, normal life is going on and supply chains are continuing without any disruption. That's the fundamental assumption, because the moment, you bring something like COVID in, a lot of the things that you can talk about becomes kind of invalidated or rather irrelevant suddenly. So we don't want to get into that situation. Other than that, the pre-scene is pretty much, it's the same as usual. We have 30 pages this time. If you look at the table of contents, you have the introduction, you have the industry piece, which also talks about developing video games, the development side of things. Then you have information about Pixlwizz, the company, your company. You're the senior finance manager now. You can actually consider yourself appointed as senior finance manager by me now. Congratulations, all of you. I'm sure the salary, even though it's not going to be any amount at all, I'm sure the reward that you're going to get by facing the examination will be something worthwhile that you carry and can be your salary for being the senior finance manager, right? If you're a good senior finance manager, think of it that way. If you're a good senior finance manager, it means that you will become a CIMA member. Brilliant. So you have Pixlwizz's annual report, board of directors, principal risk register, share price history, and even a competitor's financial statements. Pretty generic stuff. And finally, we have a segment on news stories. So just going through this, you have the introduction, video game industry. So I will come back to this. Today, core discussion is going to be on the industry. So what you're noticing is that in the first set of pages, from page number 3 up to continuously up to about page number 12, I believe, 11, you have a piece on what the video game industry looks like. And that's the first step of becoming a business insider. Because if you're operating in a business which is into video games, you must try to understand the industry by and large first. So if today our exercise goes really well, then you will have a sound understanding of the playground that Pixlwizz is in. And then we can talk about, the particular player who is, in this case, Pixlwizz. So that is the second piece. You have an element on Pixlwizz operating with locations or offices out of 4 countries. It's a pretty big business. And they have even, when you read, you see things like one of their games has become the best-selling game in 2016. So when you see things like that, it indicates toward a very successful company. Pixlwizz's annual report extract. So you have the mission, vision, and value system, board of directors. The board composition is graphically also presented. And then you have the principal risk register, which is a pretty important document. Finally, we have extracts of the financial statements. Mostly it's the income statement and the balance sheet, share price history graph. So you don't really need to, pinpoint the numbers and say, oh, this is 62.3 or something like that. Just need to know the basic trend and how the share price has done that, and the rough. So we know that it has peaked at about $60. So that kind of information is enough. Getting too hung up on the details might actually not be value adding. Competitors' financial statements. Then we have about 6 news stories. Yes. No, rather 7. That's the composition of the pre-scene document that has been assigned to you. Actually, very exciting stuff, because I myself can I can't call myself a hardcore gamer, but there was a time duration in my life where I was, very much into gaming. So the moment I saw the pre-scene, we got it a few weeks ago. It was really exciting, and going through the research, and I actually kind of installed a couple of old games I used to play, just to see if they work, and how they are. But today, when you look at it from today's perspective, the graphics and everything is just so bad. But other than that, it's a really enjoyable experience, I suppose, especially for young, youngsters, teenagers, etc. So my invitation is that you also have fun. You might take a thing or two that might lighten your life, if you decide to go into gaming. So today our discussion is going to be on the industry, and you will have noticed in your pre-scene folder. So if you go to your main Google Drive view, folder 0, 1, 2, 3, and live session recording. So in folder number 2, pre-scene and research, if you open this folder, there are 3 subfolders. One is called pre-scene analysis. And if you open this folder, you will notice that there are 3 documents called pre-scene extract. So extract is basically, those are pages ripped off from the pre-scene document. I've divided the pre-scene into 3, but that's the extract documents. You will notice that there is a new document called pre-scene analysis, and that is the document that I will be using, which is built or based on the pre-scene document, in order to take forward our discussion today. I'll talk about the activities later, so you can open the industry file in your screen, or you can work, for now, during the live session, you can work with my view that you notice on Zoom. All right, so this is the document. Ultimately, what will happen is we will do the analysis in different pieces, and then we'll put it all together, have one document, which will be an extensive analysis that will familiarize yourself inside out with this business. So today, part number 1, the video gaming industry. Okay, so you can see an image of a gamer playing a very famous game, which I'm sure you will learn the name as we go along as well. And if we look at what the pre-scene tells us, as far as the introduction to the video game industry, video gaming has existed in one form or another for decades, but the industry has changed constantly. Video games comprise interactive software that enables players to view and control graphic images and can take many forms. So it's essentially software. At the core of it, at the end of it, you're just talking about software, but the software is fun. It's fun to interact with. It tells you what to do. It gives you rewards, at least virtual rewards. So it's a fun software that also looks beautiful. So that's what differentiates a gaming software as opposed to something like Microsoft Word or Excel that you might call very boring. This industry is also highly dependent and responsive to the hardware used to run gaming software. So what happens is that as with all softwares, this particular industry is also very much dependent on the hardware, whether you're using a PC or a laptop or a smart TV or a mobile phone. It's very much dependent. That's why you have you have games developed for all kinds of hardware or all kinds of tools and various machines that have been built, sometimes consoles that are exclusively developed for gaming. The scale and the size of the industry. And you will notice that it's pretty big. It's a huge industry. Approximately 2,500 companies Approximately 2,500 companies employing approximately 70,000 people in the development of video games globally. So massive industry. And this does not include companies that support the creation and sale of video games through the manufacture and sale of hardware. And the provision of operating systems and other software that supports gameplay. Now, I want to ask a simple question at this point. Are there gaming companies that you're familiar with? Can you give me names of companies that produce games in the world? Perfect. So EA games, or EA, you have EA games, EA Sports, etc. That's a very famous company. A popular game that you would have heard coming out of EA is FIFA. So FIFA is FIFA 2006, 2000, etc., etc. Codemasters. So I think we have a gamer here. Even if you look at it, even movie production companies that you might have heard, like Universal Studios or Warner Brothers Entertainment or Disney or Marvel Studios. So these are also companies that have gaming arms within them. They produce games, they design and develop games. So we have a few examples coming up here that I hope all of you can learn from. In addition to this, you might have heard of companies like Ubisoft, Activision, Blizzard, Nintendo, etc. Some of them are not only into gamings, like if you take Nintendo or Microsoft or Apple, they are hardware manufacturers, but they also have gaming elements, or rather they work with third-party developers. Either way, it's a massive industry. In fact, as you go along, as you research the industry, you will realize that this industry is bigger than the TV, movie, and the music industry, all of it put together. It's bigger than all three together. It's massive, and we have no idea about it. Some of us are completely blind to the size of this industry. It's that big. The second point here, game developers generated revenue of approximately $170 billion in W dollars, Westland dollars, in 2020, with projected revenues of 180 billion in 2021. So these are assumed, or rather imaginary numbers. So I would say just work with those numbers because we have to kind of live in the world that the pre-scene gives us. So think of transporting yourself into that realm, that world, much like a game, I suppose. There are an estimated 2.7 billion video gamers worldwide, out of which 55% are male. And the average age of gamers is 34 years, with a wide dispersion of player ages around that age. So multitude of players in the world are around that age of 30, or rather 28 to 35. That is the range. Actually, I think the actual figures, the average video game player is 31 years old. This is the actual figure, but the latest figure. But as of the pre-scene, we go with those numbers. Just keep that in mind. It's not a big deal at all. So don't get too hung up on the number anyway. All right. That brings me to the second subsection when we learn about the industry. So first we understand that this industry is huge, around 70,000 people around the world working directly, and that is excluding the hardware manufacturers. Then we learn about different video game genres. So what are these? There are many different types of games reflecting the interests of different players and the capabilities and limitations of their preferred devices for gameplay. So we had some gamers here. Saad, so what's your favorite game? Is it a famous game? Do we know it? What do you play the most? And even others, if you have games that you've been playing, you can share the names with us. As we get the response to that, it is important when we try to understand the industry. What I always try to tell people who I work with or learners is that when you want to try and understand the industry, look at the customers, look at what they are accessing, look at how they are engaging with the business, look at what they want. So this is the different game genres are a good depiction of the kind of people and their different tastes and how those tastes are manifested in the games that we design. That is why we have so many different genres. Firstly, we have puzzles. So puzzle games, which many of you might be familiar with Microsoft Solitaire or Minesweeper. It's sort of a puzzle game. You have a certain condition and a few rules. As long as you stick to the rules, you can just sweep the entire area for the mines. So this involves an intellectual challenge with no need for quick reactions. They may be computerized versions of traditional board or card games. So chess, draughts, poker, solitaire, a lot of games that are inbuilt in your operating system, whether it's a Mac OS or Windows operating system. Just go to start menu games. You find a few of these games. Chess is a very famous game. You can find it anywhere in any PC nowadays. The second genre is action games. So action games are characterized by the fact that they involve a physical challenge, usually stressing hand-eye coordination. These games usually simulate a realistic virtual world as seen through a character's eyes. So there are different types of action games. It could be a variation of a puzzle game in which players have to react very quickly to various patterns or objects that appear on their screens. Otherwise, they will lose a life or the game will end. Now, you might have played games like Zombie Run or Commandos back in the day, or platform games which involve guiding a fantasy character on a journey, dealing with hazards along the way. So very famous a few years ago were Jungle Run. I think I used to play that a lot. It was the early times when I was just learning about mobile phone gaming, and I think Jungle Run was the first mobile phone game I ever played. I was pretty much into it for a few days. Then something became very popular that you can see in the image here, which is Subway Surfer, which is again very popular. A lot of people I know were personally playing. I'm sure the entire world was into the frenzy of Subway Surfer as well. And they had all these beautiful updates. And the most attractive thing about Subway Surfer was the colors. I think the colors attracted everyone a lot. That brings me to the third genre, which is simulations. Gameplay puts the player. So it's an important word, gameplay. So if you go to YouTube and if you type gameplay, what will happen is it refers to the view. It refers to how things look as the player is playing the game. That's what gameplay means. So don't fear the word, understand the meaning of the verb. Here, as you can see, this particular image is a gameplay image because you have trailers and game story modes where you have different, there are cinematic experiences embedded within games. Those are not gameplay, those are intermediate pieces. But then you have the moment that you're playing the game and the view that you have or the experience of playing the game actively. That term we use to refer to that particular circumstance or situation. So gameplay puts the player in control of a vehicle or another item. It could be a sword, it could be, it could be anything, and emulates the physical challenges to make the gameplay very realistic. So racing would be the best example I can just relate to personally. The software would then offer a very similar experience to driving that car. For instance, a more powerful car accelerating faster. So as the car gets better, the car gets different, the sound, the noise is different, acceleration, speed is different, how it feels is different, the speed, the graphics, the road, how it moves, everything is different. So it gives you a very, very realistic experience. And with the technology available nowadays, it has become even better. Some simulators, so I'm reading this point, some simulators offer an almost cinematic representation of the setting. So one good example I can give you, one of my personal favorites back in the day was a game series called Need for Speed, which was a racing simulation game. You also have sports simulations. So very famous is FIFA, where players can take control of their favorite team, or they can control an individual team member in order to put themselves right inside the action. So there are modes called manager mode that you're seeing on the left, where you're kind of managing, you're playing the role of a manager, you're looking after the entire thing, the auctioning, the valuations of the players, transferring of players, exchanging players, so you're going through a management experience, which is managing the entire team. Or you have the gameplay view here on the right side, where you're basically controlling a football player, a single player. It can switch between the players, but literally it's an experience of taking a single player run through to the goal from the moment you pick the ball. So this is also falling into the category of the larger category of simulations, but there's a different genre called, very popular, on sports simulations. That brings me to another very popular category of games nowadays, especially in the last 3-4 years, since around 2015-16, during the time that Activision and Blizzard started, launching games like World of Warcraft and StarCraft. Players, this genre is called RTS, real-time strategy. What happens here is that players take control of resources and elements and utilize them as they wish to make changes as they proceed. RTS games usually involve a competition against computerized or other human opponents who are competing for the same scarce resource along with other objectives. So very famous games are like games like Age of Empires, World of Warcraft, StarCraft. And I've taken a few images to give you a view. So you're basically seeing an image of, I think, World of Warcraft here. So it's a bird eyes view, and you have your army, you have your farmers, and you have all the different components, the horse riders, the archers, etc. And you either have to attack or acquire or spread your power, increase your wealth, different objectives. So you take your armies and you strategically play the game. Most of the time you either play against the computer, and there are a lot of simulation games like this which require real-time strategic thinking. So on one end, you see that these kind of games have been a positive force toward pushing the popularity of gaming, in a sense that they say that games can get you to think, games can increase your cognitive function, games can get you to think better. So these are some of the general benefits that people outline for gaming. So there are arguments against gaming as well, but these games have played a massive role in pushing the popularity of overall gaming industry bigger and better. Now, one of the most recent genres of gaming that we see nowadays is MMOs, massive multiplayer online games. So I don't know if any of you are here who watches movies, but there was a movie called Ready Player One, which is so this is a movie which I would actually suggest and recommend that you watch it. If you haven't watched it, it's based on a game, a video game, and the genre of that particular game, which is, you know, this worldwide phenomena. It's in the future, happening in the future at a time when AR VR gaming experience is at its peak. I'm sure it'll be realistic, and it'll get actualized in the next 20 or 30 years. I'm sure it'll happen. It's actually the director is Steven Spielberg. So, you know, good movie. And what you notice is that it's a good example for a MMO, where the world is so big and so many people from all over the world. It's almost like you're on Earth, and you can travel virtually, you can travel, there is no boundary. These games, while an extension of one of the above genres, such as RTS or action, involve the player taking on the role of a character in a huge and detailed virtual world. So this world is relatively far bigger than your average game. World of Warcraft, New World, etc. So MMO is a different genre, very popular nowadays. Then you have educational games. These are designed to help children develop skills such as shape and pattern recognition. So if you have young children, you know, sons or daughters who are in kindergarten or grade 1, grade 2, I'm sure that many of you are now, because of COVID, you see that a lot of schools, especially at K-12 range, are utilizing these kind of games, educational games, very colorful, very bright, very musical. You know, they teach mathematics using music, etc., songs, song play, dancing, etc. So you have a massive, like even India's Baiju, Disney's Baiju, which is heavily operating out of India, is a company that is investing a lot and doing a lot of creative work with respect to educational games. The gameplay rewards players for correctly identifying or classifying an item, and so they combine elements of education and play. So you have a couple of images here. You have a kid who is just, I think, giving us a thumbs up. But please remember that these are genres that are developed based on the information in the pre-scene. But the above is not a complete list and is purely pre-scene based. For more information, you can visit this link I have included on ID Tech, which is very extensive and it's a good read, very interesting. You'll learn a lot about different kinds of games in the world. And what happens is that most games have a combination of 2 or 3 or 4 or sometimes multiple genres in one particular experience nowadays, as this world is expanding. Pre-scene materials. So this document. So we have a simple question here. This document is my own. It's for you. It's the analysis document. The pre-scene is separate, but it's based on the pre-scene. You can find the file in your pre-scene analysis folder called Pre-scene Analysis Part 1 Industry. All right. Coming back, that brings me to the next subsection, brief one, but important one. Now, we were talking about gameplay. I referred to you, or rather I introduced to you that gameplay is the view, is how the game looks, how you experience the game. So you have games which are single player games. We call them individual category of games. And there are very, very famous games in the world like God of War, Assassin's Creed, etc. Then you have cooperative or competitive games. So multiple players in the same team or as opponents, they are all in the same world. So maybe 4 or 5 of your friends get together. They're all logging in from their houses into one location, virtual location. And you could either be the same members in one army platoon, or you might be playing different races, right? So you have 5 cars, you're racing against each other. Call of Duty, Marvel's Avengers, there are multiplayer racing games, etc. So these are some examples for different gameplay modes. So this that you see here is from a game. It's a gameplay view of a game called The Amazing Spider-Man. And you're basically seeing how the player is playing the character of Spider-Man, and you have an objective. In this particular image, you have reached the police officer, and as you go to the point, there are different hurdles. There could be enemies. You might have to save people along the way. So you have to do these things and somehow get to the objective. Sometimes these objectives are timed, so you have to get there before deadline, like what we will do with the mock exams. You have deadlines, and then you have to get the mock done before the deadline, hopefully. That brings me to another different mode. So imagine that this is your television screen, and you're with your family, 4 members, 4 consoles, and you're playing this game. What happens is that the 4 of you, the screen is divided into 4, and the 4 of you have your own personal view, and you're racing the same game, same location, same virtual location. It's pretty much the same game, which we call simultaneous multiplayer mode. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. In this particular mode, what happens is your screen is shared if you're in a single location. If you're in multiple different locations, then you have your individual screen giving your view, which you can switch. You can switch to this particular view, or you can switch on the individual view as well. It depends on what you think is easy for you, where multiple players can log into the same location. So this is another gameplay mode. So as you can see, technology has made things extremely fun, I suppose, entertaining, as the gaming industry has advanced and developed itself. So on that note, now we know that the gaming industry is a huge industry, and we also understand that there are a wide variety, possibly the widest variety of customer tastes and customer demands when it comes to gaming. And there are plenty of tools and plenty of products that cater to all those different types of customer tastes or demands. That brings me to a fundamental factor that has driven the development and the growth of this industry, and that is gaming hardware. Gaming hardware has been the exclusive, if not the most exclusive factor that has driven the development of this industry. So if you're someone who is into gaming, you're definitely someone who's waiting for the next PlayStation, waiting for the next Xbox, waiting for the next graphics hard drive or graphics package, whatever, waiting for the next console, etc. So this is why you see the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, which is the console that has done the most number of sales in the world, are very, very popular. In fact, to the point that you consider it to be a birthday gift when you're gifting a teenager or a young person who is into gaming. So even here, the image that you can see, imagine having this in front of your computer. So this is a gaming console for a PC. Where you have the keyboard, you have the gaming keys, you have your mouse, you have your headset and everything. It's a rigged system, all new. This is actually by the company called Logitech. So they have very interesting tools that have developed. Let's go through this. Developments in the video game industry have been driven largely by improvements in the hardware devices that are available to the gamers. These hardware manufacturers. So now you must be thinking of, okay, who are these hardware manufacturers? Samsung, any mobile phone manufacturer is a hardware manufacturer because you can play games in their mobile phones. So game compatibility is now a huge factor when you're manufacturing a smartphone. Beyond that, consoles will take a look at a range of the devices. These hardware manufacturers also sell a wide range of peripherals that can be plugged into computers or consoles to assist and enhance the gameplay experience. Let's take a look at some of these peripherals. The most popular one here, you can see consoles of Xbox on the right and PlayStation on the left. Is called the game console. So these are exclusively dedicated to play games. devices designed to play games in the home, connected to a television screen or a monitor. Games are loaded from physical media. It could be, back then it was DVD-ROM. Now, of course, you have the hard disk embedded in the console itself, or it can be downloaded from the internet. Console manufacturers often design their machines so that they connect directly to the manufacturer's own website. So you have a console like PlayStation 5. So this is the image, and back then, it used to be a DVD-ROM. It used to have a DVD-ROM. So you go to the shop, you buy the DVD of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare or something like that. Then you insert the DVD, you let it load, and you play the game. Now, of course, just like your portable hard disks, this is a device which has a lot of data. It could be, you can buy 1 TB, 500 GB devices. They come with different capacities. You can just load the games, or you can connect it to the Wi-Fi and download the game into the hard disk in that console, in that device. Then load the game from that, connect to a monitor, play your game. So that's pretty much what happens here. This is PlayStation 5. And how do you download these games? You can download them from the relevant website. It could be from the games website, official website of the game developer, or it could be even these games, these games are featured in the manufacturer's websites as well. So the moment I typed PlayStation 5, you would have noticed in the web search, we had PlayStation 5, play has no limits. So if you go to the PlayStation website, you'll find the gaming section from which you can tap into games that you can actively play. That brings me to the second, is a handheld console. So handheld console is a self-contained and battery-powered unit with integrated screens, much like what you see in the screen. So you basically have the screen, it's one device. Like the Game Boy back then, we used to play all these brick games, etc. These can be played without having to connect to a screen or other device, although some handheld consoles can mirror the displays onto monitors. So nowadays, screen mirroring or screen sharing is a embedded technical capability many of these devices have. So you can just share the screen like what we do here. Although games can be loaded from cartridges or downloaded from the internet. Handhelds are portable and can be used while traveling. So good examples that you see for handhelds, Apple iPad is a very famous handheld device for gaming. Nintendo Switch is the most popular handheld gaming device in existence or in the world today. All right, that brings us to very modern concepts of gaming. Virtual reality and augmented reality. So virtual reality is a major disruptor involving sensors that detect player movements, and that is fed back to the player vision, which is sensory organs, so that the player feels immersed in the virtual world created by the software. So here in this image, this is the VR device. So you wear it, and the moment you wear it, everything that you see is pretty much, a virtual world. And as you can see, this person is, he's not in this world because he's in the virtual world that he sees in the device. In a home setting, VR requires players to wear headsets that contain screens that replicate the eye's binocular vision to create a sense of depth. And that is this particular device, which we call a VR device. Now, what happens with augmented reality is it adds more depth to the gaming experience by taking input from cameras incorporated into the headset and combines that with virtual images so that the player sees both the real world and the virtual world. So in augmented reality, you have your reality, which is augmented by your virtual world. So you put virtual things into the actual reality, real world and virtual world simultaneously. So here you have this person holding the phone, and the phone's camera takes in the actual view of this particular shelf in a supermarket, and then it puts the virtual player or virtual character into that and gives us a immersive experience which combines both. And I'm sure that you remember a game called Pokemon Go, which was a huge hit in the Nintendo console as well, but also was a big hit in mobile phones. Everybody, there was a time when it was a big trending thing in the world where people were just walking around on the road, just looking at the road through their phones. There were a number of accidents as well, and there was backlash as to what the game was doing, killing people. People were just collecting all these Pokemons, virtual Pokemons that they could see in the actual streets, and just would walk with aimlessly and not without being mindful of their surroundings. So that's what augmented reality is, and it just died down as fast as it came. Somehow, this is VR and AR, which gives you a further immersive experience. And if you watch this movie called Ready Player One, so as you can see here, this player is wearing a VR device, but this particular device in this movie, futuristic, it's very advanced. So the actual experience is huge. It's completely different. And even entering into the game, you're sitting in a kind of gaming seat, which gives you the vibrations and the experience and the switches and the changes that you're going through as you're playing the game. So if you watch the movie, I'm sure that you will have a very active experience as to how VR and AR can look like. The movie is called Ready Player One. On that note, one of the most popular hardware devices that games are played on in the world is PCs and laptops. Video games are essentially just software and are popularly written for conventional computers. These are generally downloaded from the internet or can be installed by any compatible form, CD, DVD, Blu-ray, etc. They generally require significant amounts of processing power. So that's why you have dedicated graphics devices. Now, if you look at your PC, what happens is the computing power that your RAM has in your PC, in your computer, so that might actually not be sufficient to load the graphics, the visual images, the beautiful images that you want to experience in a game. And then comes in factors like this resolution of the screen, the size of the screen, etc. And this the need for the processing power becomes even more bigger. So if your actual motherboard in your PC, the actual processing power, the basic processing power is not enough, we go into graphics cards, which are additional processing power purely dedicated to gaming that we install. So this is a huge hit by a lot of people who are into gaming. Serious gamers often invest heavily in powerful graphics cards and other components that can cope with the demands created by games. So can I quickly see, just to know, do you know the most famous graphics card manufacturer in the world? Anybody knows the name of the company? They're much bigger now, exactly, and they're not only into graphics anymore, they're into artificial intelligence heavily. And NVIDIA is actually one of the world's leading companies which are into self-driving technology. Level 5 self-driving automobile technology, or AI, artificial intelligence writers, is NVIDIA company. But they were initially very, very famous. And even here, the image that you're seeing is a graphics card by NVIDIA called GTX or GeForce, something like that. A long time ago, even I bought a couple of these, long time ago. Massive improvements in the graphics processors, which we call GPUs, graphics processing units, used in PCs and consoles, have encouraged developers to create games that make full use of that processing power. Many games offer players the opportunity to engage with a virtual world that comes close to being photographic in terms of image quality. This is now a critical consideration by gamers when purchasing or developing hardware. And yes, NVIDIA and AMD. AMD had their series called Radeon graphics cards, which were hugely popular and supported mostly some of the Intel processors. They had Pentium processors, etc. So a different range of Intel processors. So that's PCs and laptops, which are very popular. And just to kind of give you an image, so if you look at something like this, look at how immersive this particular experience is. So this is actual gameplay view. This is what you're seeing. So you can leisurely just play the video and watch it, but this is serious stuff. Graphically, they are built to look so good that they have actually led to addiction. Game addiction is one of the biggest problems that a lot of people in the world are facing. So this just plays out like that continuously. There are some pretty heavy duty stuff here. Like this is an image from Lord of the Rings. So look at this kind of accident that's happening. All these cars that look really authentic, and even the experience of driving the car, they actually talk to the car manufacturer, license it, record the sounds of the audios of the car at different player levels, different speeds, accelerator power, etc., everything, and they try to incorporate it into the game. So it's very, very realistic nowadays. And you can just watch a few things when you get some time. The next device category is tablet, smartphones, and smart televisions. So players can also download games onto their phones, tablets, and smart televisions, which have sufficient processing power to offer gameplay. While these don't offer the same processing power as consoles or PCs, they're convenient and may avoid the need to buy a separate device to run gaming software, and is highly popular today. So this is a huge deal. And if you look at certain mobile phones like the iPhone X, etc., you're basically looking at a phone that is built for heavy duty gaming, and with a lot of battery power, a lot of graphics processing capacity. You can play extremely detailed games, highly detailed games in those mobile phones. So you can, just plug in a peripheral device that lets you do the controls in the game, not even touch the phone, just keep the phone. There are different devices to just mount the phone as well in a convenient way. And you play just like you're playing it on a smart television that you can see on this image. This brings me to the latest development that we see with gaming, which is called cloud gaming. And as you can see, I'm sharing so much content with you through Google Cloud. So I don't have a server. I don't have any hardware. My setup is very simple. I just have a laptop, my lighting, my camera. That's it. So how am I then storing? Where am I storing all this content? So earlier, I was talking about how DVDs and Blu-rays and hard disks, and you have those consoles, you have all these devices that you need to store the game. But nowadays, what happens is you actually have this capacity or this technology called cloud, where the cloud host will take care of the storage for you. You just have to have a very steady internet connection. As long as you have that, you can plug and play anytime you want, any way you want. This is a relatively recent development, expected to be a huge growth area in the industry. This is when the websites that require players to connect and access their accounts are cloud-based. Websites are provided by gaming hardware manufacturers like PlayStation, or gaming software developers like Blizzard, or standalone companies which provide this facility as a commercial service. So there are players like Microsoft, hardware manufacturers. If you look at Microsoft's PlayStation, Microsoft's Xbox, PlayStation by Sony, and Amazon's Luna. These are all projects which are central websites that offer gaming platforms, and they're connected to a cloud server. So you don't have to pay for the storage or anything like, or rather, you don't have to maintain storage or service. They take care of that. You just have to plug and play. So this is the most recent development that has transformed, or that is currently transforming, the gaming industry as we experience it now. All right, that brings us to the money side of things. How does gaming make money for the company? Let's take a look at revenue generation from that angle. There are various ways in which revenues are generated from games. So in a very classical form, you have downloads and boxed games. The player pays to download the gaming software or to purchase a physical medium, such as a console game, cartridge, or a DVD-ROM. The payment entitles the player to run the game and may also grant access to online forums for play against other human competitors. Example, FIFA, God of War, etc. So you have a lot of additional what we call supplementary money-making methods that are associated to downloading or installing and playing games, like live stream. Live stream is a huge thing. I think one of the biggest, or the biggest YouTuber in the world, personal YouTuber in the world, called PewDiePie, is a gamer, and he became huge, and his gaming platform is extremely big, and he live streams all the major games. Like there are some games to come out of certain cultures and certain companies, so he sponsors them, and it's a huge business. Then you have pay to play games. Players pay a relatively small amount each time they log in and play, or they can make a monthly subscription payment. So you have a monthly subscription like Netflix, and when you want, you just log in and play. And you can basically, when you exit the game, it saves the game at that point. So you have the save data. When you log in back, it's like you never left, and you start continuing to play from the point that you stopped. Then you have cloud gaming, which is the most recent form that I just introduced to you a while ago. It's a recent form of pay to play, where payers pay a monthly fee that entitles them to play any of a selection of games offered by the website provider hosted through cloud, and you can play it online. These gameplays can also be live streamed, and as a result, various new channels of revenue have emerged. So Microsoft has their xCloud platform, Google has its Stadia platform, NVIDIA has its GeForce Now platform, etc. Amazon has its Luna platform, all cloud platforms which hosts games that players can play online by paying a monthly subscription fee. Depending on the games they select, the subscription fee changes. Then you have free to play games. So these games are completely free to play, like Subway Surfer, Jungle Run. You just download it and you play it. These are downloadable or web-based. The player must register and is given the opportunity to make in-game purchases. So when you play, like one of the games that I used to play was called Mortal Kombat. And the recent versions of Mortal Kombat was, it's free to play. You keep playing. But if you want to upgrade the character, you want to make the character more powerful, or you might want to purchase a new character, new weapons, etc. For those things, you have to make small payments. The monetary cost of these purchases is generally only a few cents per item, but purchasing opportunities are frequent and continue throughout the game, even into the most advanced levels. So be careful, because I have heard plenty of stories of my friends who have little young kids, and they have these games installed, free to play games, and then you just get the hang of it, and end of the day, it's linked to the credit card, because when you wanted to install the game, you had to give a credit card to verify that it's an adult user who is actually owning the mobile phone, but it's connected. So sometimes these kids actually go out and just click, okay, I want this, I want that, and end of the day, your card is overdrawn, and you're in trouble and you're going bankrupt just because your kid was playing a game. So just be careful to not let that happen. I've actually heard stories where exorbitant amounts were used by kids on their fathers or mothers' cards. Just be wary of that. And you might think, no, you start to play, it's free to play, I'm just going to play the free component, I'm not going to worry too much. But as you play, sometimes you get so hooked into it that you never see it coming. Suddenly you know that if you buy this sword, you are able to go to the next level, and you have come up through 99 levels, and you want to go to the 100th level. It's just a game, it has no value in your life, but you just want that self-satisfaction. And in order to do that, you just check, okay, sword, $3, you start buying that. And that moment, that impression, that first sale is what they need. Because if you do that, it means that you have got the habit of doing that. You have done it once, means that you can do it twice, thrice, just like how people get into credit card debt, etc. So be wary of that. Example, you can pay to create characters, to unlock restrictions to the gamer's ability, to buy virtual objects such as maps or magical powers that can enhance their characters, etc. Finally, you have social games, which are huge in social media networks like Facebook. These are available through social networks and paid for by advertisers who can develop games that promote their brands and products. So you had very famous games on Facebook like Candy Crush, Farmville, 8-Ball Pool. I'm sure that these are still famous. Even nowadays, a lot of people are playing these games. So that's one major category or way of making money. So quickly, just making sure, giving you a summary, you have game downloads. Players pay to download games or buy games out of the shelf. They pay to play the game. They could pay a subscription fee to keep playing a range of games. There are free to play games in which you have certain purchases. And there are social games for which advertisers pay you to make sure that there is heavy engagement. A small component with respect to payments is the identity validation aspect. Most online games require the entry of a valid credit card number, as I said earlier, and to ensure that the game account is being created by an adult with the ability to pay, even if the intention is to create an account for a child's use. So nowadays, it's a pretty common phenomena where you want to install a certain app or get into a particular subscription. You have to provide a valid credit card detail, and it doesn't process a payment, but it's important that it's the way they ensure that suppose someone, even by mistake, because hundreds and thousands of people around the globe daily, by mistake, they press some button and they make purchases to credit cards. So that is a phenomena, and we can't discount the fact that banks don't know this or banks don't care about it. That's definitely one consideration. But beyond that, it's also to validate the identity that it is someone who can pay. Even this makes it possible for players to charge the cost of purchases to that card. Game accounts can often take automatic payments from credit cards unless that facility is disabled by the credit card holder. Important note, game companies set out terms and conditions. Like when you install an app, we never read it, but there is always that T&C section where you just click on agree. Like, we have agreed so much in our life that we are the most agreeable, most compromising, most beautiful, humble people, if we count the number of agreements we have agreed to in the mobile phones. So these terms and conditions under which credit cards can be charged. But one of the things that we agree to when we press this is that we allow or we agree to the fact that these companies can charge. Even like a good incident in my own family, where the brother had installed a software or an application into the mobile phone of the sister. And in order to do that, he had connected the sister's credit card, and a year had passed. The first year had passed. Nobody knew anything. And suddenly, it was an annual fee of $199. Suddenly, $200 worth of Sri Lankan rupees here missing from the account. And it was a huge scene in the family. And, everybody was just thinking that somebody had stolen the card, and they complained the bank and etc. But when we like kind of properly just looked at the account and what had happened, who it had been charged to, it was some completely useless mobile phone application, and they had just charged $100 and $200. I sent out an email, and there was a refund made also. But yeah, it can happen. So just be careful. Because under these agreements, when you accept it, the player's account is created, and your permission is granted for the payment to be charged. All right. On that note, we move on to the next section, which is video game development. And we are looking at it from the perspective of employees, video game employees, or the different kind of skills required. But I have a separate piece of very useful video, which I hope will be useful to you to understand this. But there are some important elements. And here you can see the picture of a gamer in front of a couple of screens. You have the graphical image on the left. You have the build image on the right, which is not graphical or fun to look at all, but it's pretty detailed, and those game development softwares are very, very advanced. So if you look at the people involved, think of it like a movie script that is under development and a movie in production. So you have the game producer, who is in overall charge of the commissioning and development of a video game. The game producer, think of it like the owner of the game. Video game companies develop ideas internally through market research or based on ideas suggested by gamers who participate in social media forums. So this is an important element because you are a video game producer. Pixlwizz, of which you are the senior finance manager, predominantly your role in this entire industry is of a video game or game producer. Then you have game designers who create the basic brief that drives the development. So they don't work on the software or anything like that. They have design softwares, but they're not development softwares. So they come up with these ideas. They design the concepts. The designer must make decisions concerning the nature of the game, the mode, the gameplay view, the kind of game, RTS or action or simulation, etc. And the way players will interact with game elements. Those decisions allow for both the nature of the gameplay and the aesthetic appeal of the game's appearance and soundtrack. So some of the very famous games like Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Marvel's Avengers. So you have all these games that are based on very cult and popular franchises, movie franchises or book franchises or something like that. You have Japanese anime-based games like Dragon Ball and Naruto. So these are like very powerful animation characters on which the games are developed. And if you look at the soundtrack and the appearance, they all emulate the original content that was either drawn on a comic strip, but they all emulate that. So it is an important aspect to consider accessibility, because game design must consider the limitations of the hardware on which it will be played. So if you make it too complicated, too much processing power, then it might not be compatible for most devices. And that means that only the rich can play or only the specialists can play. But you don't really want games like that. The more gamers are playing the game, the more popular it will be, and ultimately the more money you're making. So we want to be, that is why you see games like World of Warcraft, those MMO games, RTS games, they need little processing power, but hugely popular because a lot of people have the hardware that can be used to play those games, as opposed to like games like Ghost of Tsushima or God of War or whatever, where it's exclusive. You need a massive processing power. You need huge machines. If you are talking about PCs, so only, not everyone has the audacity or the need to just, rig a set like that, investing, I don't know, thousands and thousands of dollars. A smartphone game, so it's at this point, a smartphone game must be suitable for play on a relatively small screen with game control offered through the phone's touch screen while a console game offers much more scope for detailed graphics because they will be displayed on a large screen. The gameplay itself can be more complex because players will have controllers equipped with joysticks and buttons. So when you have the smartphone, just download a game, you just have the screen. So it's nowadays, of course, you have games like PUBG and Free Fire, which have a lot of controls in the screen itself. So you're just touching, like if you look at a person who is playing Free Fire or PUBG from a third person's point of view, it will look like someone who's really crazy, who's just, attacking the screen like, there's no tomorrow. But when you actually go and look at the screen, you realize, okay, there are just like the console, just like what you see here, what happens is, so all these buttons, these four buttons, everything, it's in the screen. So you just touch the screen and, you have those buttons in your access, something similar to that effect. However, it's a important factor, and as technology, and this is one reason when you practically think about it, why smartphone screens are getting bigger, or why you have ranges which have bigger screens. And we think that it's for the camera, but mostly, even though they don't talk about it too much, they show it, they feature it in their trailers a lot. iPhone, Samsung Galaxy series, the iPad, these are devices built for gaming. Hardcore gamers who are heavily into these mobile phone games, etc. They even stream their game play mode into the internet. There are thousands and millions of people who, and it's actually surprising to me that a few months ago, I was just traveling in the bus. I was coming back from the airport, and I just got into the, the public bus, and I was there, and the whole ride, it was about 1.5 hours ride. There was a kid who was sitting in, I was standing, and there was a kid who was sitting in front of me. And this kid was looking at a phone, staring at a phone. And what was in the phone was another person playing this game. And on that day, it hit me how big the streaming business, the live streaming business is. And, after that, I just checked, I just looked at it, because I was just a person who had played games, and I thought, it's an exclusive piece. But no, a lot of people are just staring at, if you go to YouTube and just, type live stream, game live streaming, you will find certain channels with millions and millions of subscribers, and all what people are doing is just watching at another person playing a game on the screen. I don't know what logic it really has, but it's huge. I really don't understand the the mechanics of that and how it works, how it adds value to a person, but it's massive. So maybe as Pixlwizz, you can tap into that. You can be very happy about it. The gameplay itself is more complex because players will have controls. All right. So as the device becomes different, the accessibility can change. That's design. Then you have game artists. They use the designer's brief. So the designer designed the game, and it is passed on to the artist. So the artists use that brief to create the characters and backgrounds. And this is very detailed and very exhausting work, because when you play a game, you have that, the buildings and the ocean and the street view and everything that is in the background, which has to look good, because if those don't look good, it's pretty boring. You play a game for the image and the visual representation of it. So this is exhausting work. And there are a lot of problems in the union side of things, worker side of things, which we'll come across later. These designs and arts and the characters and the look and feel must be suitable both for programming as game elements and as art for promotional materials such as web pages and box art, if the games are to be supplied on digital media. So this is one of the most famous games in the world today, currently, called God of War, and visually one of the most appealing games. It's a single player game, not multiplayer. So relatively the crowd that plays this game is small, but they sell it at premium and the experience is huge. You can just type God of War on YouTube and just check out some of the visuals, gameplay images, and you'll be stunned. Then you have level designers. So they are a little different to game designers. They expand upon the designer's brief by creating the story underpinning a game. So most games nowadays are level based, which involve a story. Level designers must also adapt the files created by the game artists to ensure that they can be programmed and incorporated into the game. So think of it like Super Mario, playing Super Mario, you had the first level, then the second level, third level, it becomes harder as you go. They may require compromises, such as deciding on the complexity of a game element. Greater complexity enhances realism, but it also requires more processing power and could overtax the hardware on which the game is being played, leading to reduced number of players. So these levels, now this is an image from a game called, very popular game back in the 2016 2017 time period, called Injustice, which had all these superhero characters. So it had the level idea was that actually what happens is the Superman's wife dies, and then what happens, that's the level 1. Level 1 is the story where the wife dies. Then the level 2 is where Superman becomes a bad guy because his wife died, and that process. And then the third level, I know this because I played the game, the third level is where Superman conquers the world. So he wants to stop this corruption, so he conquers the world. He turns from good guy to bad guy, and he dominates the entire world. Level 4 is all the other superheroes getting together and scheming to defeat Superman. So that's how the story, the levels play out. And as you go from one level to the other, the game design, the complexity, the experience, the exposure, the world that you access. First, you're only in America, and then suddenly it becomes global. Then suddenly it becomes kind of universal. These levels can add to its detail in terms of depth. It can go deeper and deeper and deeper. These levels can vary by changes in the nature or difficulty of the gameplay, and even the appearance of the background and of the controllable elements such as characters. All right, so that's a little bit about game levels. Game programmers. Now, these are the most critical people and probably the specialists in the industry who are the highest paid, and also on one end, the lowest paid, which we have a huge union problem, worker problem, inequality problem, lack of diversity problem. They create the actual software code base for the game. So as we started with, this is software like your Microsoft Office, Zoom. It's just software. At the end of things, at the back end of things, you just have ones and zeros, code. So these programmers are the ones who create the actual code for the game, and it's a complex area. Many programming specialisms are there. They often develop software that can be used for game development. So what happens is, for the development, there are development softwares. Like for photo processing, you have a software called Adobe Photoshop. Similarly, for game development, you have game development softwares. In those softwares, they work and develop the game. And we have a point here. Is it like spectators for a football game or a cricket match? Exactly. So I'm thinking that you refer to the streaming. It's crazy if you really think about it. So you can actually just type YouTube gaming, which is a huge thing, gaming YouTube. So this is a platform, right? This is a platform, sub-platform, like a channel on YouTube where gamers play. So you can subscribe to the channel. I haven't, I don't want to. And you just have all these games, and what happens is, see, there are people who are simply playing for you to watch. So you have this is gameplay, and 60,995 views. This is gameplay mode, and they play the game. See this person, they just killed. Sorry, I couldn't give you a disclaimer on the graphical nature of things. Oh, it's a really violent game, and people just log into the internet, and they just keep looking at this the whole time. Just like what we see in a cricket match or a football, they are spectators of another person playing a game. But for me, watching a cricket match is very different to, I don't know this, but this is the first time I'm watching a live stream of a game, and it looks pretty interesting. you can kind of go with the flow and enjoy it, I suppose. My God. All right. So okay. So I guess there's some appeal to this, I suppose. All right. So on that note, I'm stopping this live stream here in our live session. Coming back to our discussion, I was talking about game programmers who have dedicated software to develop the games, and they work on those. So this is an image. As you can see, this is the game software that you can see, the toolbars, etc. And the gamer is developing the character in this particular image. So it's a very demanding exercise to do. Elements such as buildings that appear on the horizon that can change in size and shape as the player's angle and the perception changes, created by the game development software, will then be combined with the software written for specific parts of the game itself. So you have those background software code, then you have the level code, you combine all of it and you put the game together. And it has to be compatible also. The software also encompasses features such as incorporating input from physical devices, such as the effects of pressing a car's accelerator or striking with a sword. So nowadays you actually see where people just plug in all these sensors into the car, the noise, and they take all the input from the actual world, actual life, and incorporate it into the game. So this is a matter to touch on when it comes to the complexity, because video games require significant amounts of time and effort in programming, and the creation of a new game might require hundreds of programmers working in collaboration for many months. That is particularly true of MMOs, which are these open games, massive multiplayer games, because the world is huge. Now imagine, like, we couldn't literally fathom creation of Earth, right? You have all the continents. Imagine putting together Earth. How complicated would that process be? How difficult? How much of detail? So you have gamers today, game program developers and games, which literally have these massive worlds. So they take years. There was a game called 2077 Cyberpunk. Yeah, Cyberpunk 2077. So this is a very, very famous game, and it's a MMO. So you have action role-playing video game, which take place in Night City, an open world set. Open world. It's like the actual world. You can go from this corner to that corner, and the corner won't end. It's literally like your inner world. So that is what the word open world means, and it's built within a universe called Cyberpunk universe. So these games, actually this game was under development for nearly 10 years. Keanu Reeves is a guest character in that game, and the initial launch utterly failed because the programmers missed the deadlines. So they had the launch set for a particular date, all the trailers and everything looked good, but gameplay was not ready. And that is why you see one of the most frequent questions is Cyberpunk 2077 fixed? And is Cyberpunk 2077 good yet? Right? So you have these questions because the game botched in its initial launch. So they do take a large amount of time and effort. Some games such as platform mobile games are much smaller in comparison, but will still require programming skill, like Subway Surfer, Jungle Run, etc. We have a few games locally developed as well. Mobile phone app development, game development has become very easy nowadays. And I know I have a lot of friends who are into that. Finally, you have a critical portion or critical skill required. And you might actually think, wow, is this actually a job? Yes, it is. A lot of people are paid for this. Game testers, imagine what they do. Yes, they just test games. They play games. That's their job. That's their life. They ensure that the game is working correctly by playing levels that have been written. The testers are checking for programming errors, but are also interested in the playing experience. They also consider the suitability of the game for target markets. It might be necessary to indicate that players could be disturbed by, say, a highly realistic depiction of a crash in a driving simulation game. So they just try to simulate the experience before it goes out to market. And one of the factors they look at is playability. It's a critical success factor when it comes to game launch. Successful video games must be playable, and playability implies that the game is itself enjoyable to play. Players must be interested in achieving the game's goals, whatever they may be. They must also be provided with suitable interface that enables them to interact with the game effectively and without undue distraction. Game testers also test this aspect. So here you have an image of game testers. So what they do is just play the game, and we might actually think it's fun, but it's not, because during its development stages, the game comes to them. So they're playing not a complete game. They're playing it as it's under development. So they're looking at, various aspects. So that's actually a very hectic process and not as fun as we think it is. So you have Xbox here. They're playing some first-person shooter game on Xbox, but a very highly paid job in the gaming industry. So that's the set of skills required as outlined in the pre-scene. However, there are technicians, UI designers. It's a vast array of jobs that you find if you just log into a gaming company and go to their vacancy website, it's massive. Overall, we have by and large producer, game designer, game artists, level designers, game programmers, and game testers. So these are the people. Now, how you relate to this is you have to understand that these are the key people that we employ. We have a staff that are composed of these kind of people who do this kind of work. That is the key understanding you must have. And by that, you must understand the nature of the demand of these particular job roles. That brings me to the last couple of elements. We have KPIs, key performance indicators in the video game industry. Publishers monitor the success or failure of published games using a variety of KPIs. Due to the surge in online gaming, measuring and tracking these KPIs have become easier today because you're tracking them real time. So if you have a player or 1,000 players offline playing it and you have no idea where they are, how they are playing, how long they are playing, that's different to having platforms like cloud gaming today, where real time there are 50 players currently accessing the game and they average 4 hours a day, etc. So you have metrics like daily active users and monthly average users, which gives an insight into the frequency of play. The higher the statistic, the more enjoyable a game must be. MAU, which is monthly average users, is less subject to distortion. Then you have measures like average sessions per user. One person, how many sessions? Could be a particular time duration, within a week, within a month, etc. Average session length. For how long does a player play? Like, to establish how frequently the average user plays and understand the game's popularity. Right. So I can tell you, like, there was a game called Need for Speed Most Wanted back in the day. I'm saying 2008, 2009 era. And I have literally played one particular, cops chasing me for about 5 days. I just continued to play. And not that I was just pausing and taking my breaks and sleeping and all that, but I just continued to play it. I wanted to set a record or something like that. I was pretty nuts at that age. After finishing college, I was just taking a break and, I spent a week on that. So average session length or average sessions per user. Player retention over different time frames measures the percentage of newly registered players who return within, say, that's like recurring users, say 24 hours or 7 days or 28 days. Player retention. Player spend measures, such as average revenue per user, RevPAR, or average revenue per DAU, daily active user. So daily, how many users on average, how much are they spending? The K factor, or what we call the viral coefficient, is a pretty specific KPI for this industry. It's a measure of the extent to which existing players attract new players. So the viral factor. For example, if existing players recommend a game to 1 million friends and 300,000 of those friends register as players, then the K factor is 1.3. That's the depiction given. So if you refer to it to 1 million people, out of which 300,000 register with us, the K factor is 1.3. That's 1 plus 300,000 over 1 million. 1 plus total number of gamers who switched, who adopted the game, divided by total number of referrals. So these are just a few KPIs. As you go along, as you research, as you understand the industry, you'll realize the KPIs, the range of KPIs are vast. There are also specific KPIs depending on the games, the kind of game genres, because you can't have the same KPIs that attract first-person multiplayer or single-player shooting games, as opposed to a board game, as opposed to RTS, as opposed to a MMO. So you have different KPIs for these different genres as well. Finally, controls by age group. So I'm not sure if you have ever seen these logos somewhere in DVD box sets, etc. So I'm sure you would have seen early childhood, everyone, E10 plus or teen, which is very common, 17 plus, adults only, rating pending. So these are all issued by the Entertainment Standard Rating Board, ESRB. What happens is that video games are classified for suitability by their age, by player age. The main reason is to prevent children from being exposed to unsuitable content, such as on-screen violence. So tendency to violence is one of the biggest problems that is in gaming. It's if you type risks of gaming or disadvantages of gaming, you'll find it at the top of many of the accepted lists in the world, where those of them who play games have a higher tendency toward the violent acts. So I don't know whether it can be attributed to gaming itself, but I'm sure that gaming has some connection to that as well. These classifications or ratings, however, can vary by country. So keep that in mind, because a 17 plus game in an Asian country can be a teen game in Europe. So it can vary by country depending on how the local standardization looks at, or their perspective at the game. And that is a completion of the industry outlook based on the pre-scene. So everything in the pre-scene as far as the industry, I find it more easier to organize it in a better way. So we looked at the introduction and the scale of this industry. We looked at different genres. We looked at different modes of gameplay with a few examples. We looked at the primary development factor, growth factor of the industry, which is gaming hardware. We looked at new driver of the growth, which is cloud-based gaming. We looked at different methods of revenue generation, the identity validation aspect as well. Then we looked at skills required with examples. Then we looked at a few KPIs used, very prominent KPIs. And finally, that game accessibility can be restricted by age group controls. Finally, in this document, you will notice that I have extracted all the charts and graphs from the pre-scene into this page. So you have global video games revenue in $W billions. So these are presumptuous or imaginary numbers. Don't get too hung up on the numericals. Just look at the trends. Video gamers by age, global video game revenues by type of device, global revenues from PC-based games, global revenues from console-based games. So you can consider it as of now, as of October 2021, these images. A small activity to you, identify and list the basic observations. So prepare a list on your own. You can do it in parallel to the financials analysis of the pre-scene. Identify and list the basic observations that can be derived from the above charts. Example, smartphones generate. So I looked at this graph here. So you can notice that smartphones, they take up a massive portion. Smartphones generate the maximum revenue from among all types of gaming devices. That's one observation. So you can arrive at many such observations by looking at these graphs. So just build a list of like 10 points that you see based on the trends. That is the activity on the industry pre-scene piece. And on that note, we mark the end of the first part of the pre-scene analysis. That is the exercise to understand the overall video game industry. And I said that this is the playground. The player or players in this playground are game producers, game development companies, and hardware manufacturers. We are one of them, called Pixlwizz. That is what we will be looking at next week, familiarizing ourselves with the inside track of our own company, your own company, how your company operates. We'll understand that. Right. So the first one is a book, an ebook called The Complete History of Computer and Video Games. And it's only up to 1996. You don't really have to read the entire book, but it'll give you, because we started the discussion today by reading a very simple line. I told you that video gaming has existed in one form or another for decades, but the industry has changed constantly. How exactly has that happened? And that is what you can briefly, if you go through, just do a rush job of it. There are some very interesting points, good examples here. Some things that you might even personally relate to. In your childhood, you might have played, consoles. You might have actually seen this, the Nintendo, Game Boy, etc. So it might actually be a fun read. I enjoyed it very thoroughly. After looking at all my research content on history of video gaming, I decided that this was the best one for you to get a look. And the second document issued by the international organization called the Entertainment Software Association. So this is the organization. In fact, if you look at their members, look at the companies, all of them, gaming companies like Activision Blizzard, Capcom, CI Games, Disney Interactive, Electronic Arts, you have Intellivision, Koch Media, Microsoft, Nintendo of America, Nvidia Corporation, Rebellion, Sega, Sony Interactive Entertainment, Tencent, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers Group, Wizards of the Coast, etc. So this is the organization that kind of brings together everyone and publishes a lot of interesting content. This is the 2021 essential facts about the video game industry. So it's a very, very interesting read, very graphical. You learn a lot about this industry now that we have the basic understanding, basic knowledge that the pre-CIM wanted to give us. On top of that, if you bring this up, if you read this through, it will take 10-15 minutes of your time. You'll have a very solid understanding, a level of understanding of this industry that is more than enough to equip you really well to facing this upcoming challenge. The idea is to be familiar with the industry and pre-CIM really well. Jazeera, where they talk about gaming. Where you can get a really good understanding of the modern industry, the pitfalls, the positives, the negatives, etc. A gaming industry video. Gravitas is an Indian company. So they also have an introduction to the video gaming industry. So both of those videos, it will take about 15 minutes of your time. And if you put those two together, you'll have a very graphical remembrance of this industry. Good video developed to give you a good understanding of different gaming modes, first person, weaponry, etc. So there's narration as well in the background, sky view, bird's view, ground view, different gameplays, etc. So if you're interested, you can. Having said that, I always credit or attribute the success of the session not to myself, but for the students, but for the members. If you work hard, there's a fundamental principle I believe in, and I have literally witnessed in my life. Whatever you strive for, you get. If you strive for something, that is what you get. The extent to which you strive for is what the extent of the result will be. This is something that I have seen commonsensically across the board. It's something that I see with my personal life also. If I strive hard for something, the rewards and the results, even though they might not be the expected ones, they can be far more reaching than we ever thought, we ever imagined. I never thought that when I did CIMA, I'll be someone, doing this, teaching, helping members clear CIMA. I started off very small, teaching business mathematics and management accounting about 12 years ago. But here I am, specializing in the case study, and I've been able to help hundreds of students or learners globally. So I know, I am confident, and within a few weeks, I'll be able to tell you 100% as to you, who you are and where you stand and whether you will be passed. But I'm really confident because my understanding is if you're here, if you are eligible for the SCS, it means you're capable of passing it. It's just a matter of just getting through that hurdle. So I'm confident about that. From my end, as a coach, as a mentor, as a guide, you will notice that everything that you get, the content, the delivery, the support, the honesty, the quality is something that I strive to give you the best. So this is the world's best CIMA SCS coaching program. So you can trust in that, and you don't have to blindly trust that. You will notice if you compare, if you analyze, if you study, if you look at what's out there, you will see what it is. So as I said, one of the fundamental reasons how I do this session is rather than me coming to you, it's better that you come to me, so that trust is there. That you're getting more than you bargained for, God willing. That is what I strive for. So inshallah, we'll work together. We'll get this done. Be positive, please. Be positive. Any notion of, whether will I fail, what will happen, how will I, will I be able to give this time, etc. Because sometimes some people just either for the business of it or, whatever reasons it may be, I'm no judge. I have no understanding of why they make it out to be. But even CIMA at times makes it look like it's a very difficult paper. That it's a difficult paper. But if you properly, if you want to go to New York from Los Angeles, if you ask someone who knows the way, they'll guide you in a very simple term. But if you ask someone who either has an ulterior motive, or if you ask someone who doesn't know the way, then they're going to make this journey very, very complicated. So that's the same thing I see with this, as with most things in the world. Some people just overcomplicate things. This is not a difficult paper. I told you last week, it's a practical paper, but you need certain things to be solid as the foundation. If the foundation is solid, which is what I'm working on with you, then the paper is an easy thing. You will notice. And more than beyond everything, I would invite you to just take a look at past papers. Go through a few. You will realize what kind of paper it is. You yourself will understand. All right, so this is the game. So then you'll know that I'm telling you the truth. So be confident, be positive, put in that effort consistently, and inshallah, you will get through this, and you will put CIMA behind you and move on to bigger, better, more important things, as I always say. Brilliant. So I suppose I have answered all the questions for today. I really hope that today was a good experience, that you have a good understanding, that we achieved our objectives. You have some work to do over the coming week. You can engage yourself positively, actively, confidently. And I will see you, inshallah, on Saturday, the next, at the same time, 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time, or the equivalent in your own time zones. Thank you very much for, again, your trust. Let's get this done. This is an easy thing. As the weeks go along, you'll realize that. Good luck. All praise is due to the Almighty, and may peace be upon all of you and all your loved ones from my heart. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.